Good morning. We will start the class now. The recording has been started. So this is the last class that I will formally take. This will be a continuation of the catalytic processes that we have discussed in the last few classes. Catalytic processes are so many that we cannot cover everything in a one semester course. So what I have done is I've just picked up key catalytic processes and I have tried to illustrate the principles that we have learned through the course. I just tried to illustrate the principles that we have learned through this course. So that's the idea behind these 4 or 5 lectures on catalytic processes. Very significant omissions are CH activation. CH activation. I will, if I finish this one thing quickly, I will go to CH activation. There is also this so-called borrowing hydrogen strategy, borrowing hydrogen reactions. These reactions are also very interesting. Ligand assisted reactions. These two are in fact coupled. So these are 3 things that I am regretfully leaving out because of the number of classes that we have. We have less number of classes than what we can manage. So today I'm going to talk about one of the most complicated reactions in organometallic chemistry, catalytic organometallic chemistry, and that is the Wacker reaction. The Wacker reaction. Wacker is the name of the company, Wacker Chemie. It's again a German company that was an electrochemical company. And that's an electrochemical company that was there. And the strategy that they adopted was determined by another company which came to establish an industry close to them. And they said that they're going to supply olefins. And these people were wondering how to leverage the availability of ethylene, which they're going to get in large amounts, how to use ethylene. And they were interested in making acetic acid and acetaldehyde. So those were the 2 things that they were interested in. And when these people these people suggested that they supply ethylene in large amounts, they figured out a way very quickly to make acetaldehyde from ethylene. This is beautifully described by this person, Reinhard Ihra. It's J-I-R-A, but it's pronounced Ihra. So this person has written a paper which makes very good reading. I will post it in the reading material section or in the file section for you to look at. Now, the beauty of this discovery is really amazing because they in fact literally smelt the reaction. But what is more interesting is that he says that the boom in palladium chemistry was partly because of the way in which they were able to promote this reaction, which is also based on palladium. So what they did was they wanted acetaldehyde, and they had ethylene in large amounts, or the company that was going to give them ethylene in large amounts. So it's very easy to see that between ethylene and acetaldehyde, there is only one atom of oxygen that is missing. So you need to do, this is basically an oxidation reaction that they had to perform. They were able to do it with silver, and silver was expensive, or palladium. And when they tried it with palladium, and with palladium they in fact smelt acetaldehyde. So this is amusing, because at the time the company did not have a gas chromatograph, they could not figure it out, but a small amount of acetaldehyde was smelt by the workers. Uh, uh, the person who was responsible for this reaction is again a person whom you have met earlier. His name is Hafner. Those of you who remember names will recollect that this is Fischer-Hafner synthesis. So Hafner moved to the industry, although Fischer and others tried to persuade him to go into an academic job. He wanted to take up an industrial position, and it was one of the persons was Hafner. The chief of this company was a person called Schmidt, and he also played an important role apart from ERA. ERA did the solution chemistry. They quickly did a literature search, and amazingly they found that platinum Zeiss complex. Zeiss complex is one of the first organometallic compounds that was known, that was available in the literature, and that compound had a molecule of water in the crystal structure, and it decomposed to give acetaldehyde. So everything fit together. There was some reaction that was happening, which was converting ethylene into acetaldehyde, and palladium was capable of doing it. Palladium is much cheaper than platinum. So obviously the question is, how exactly are they going to proceed from that point onwards? So I think I will skip this slide. I'll skip this slide and I'll explain to you what happened next. The first reaction is this reaction. They found out that the oxidation, basically the reaction of palladium chloride, reaction of ethylene and water was promoted by palladium chloride. Like I said, Zeiss salt just needs heating and it generates acetaldehyde, and they formed palladium metal. Palladium metal was a species that was left behind. It was Schmidt who realized that the palladium metal, if it was a stoichiometric reaction, it would have been virtually no-win situation. He realized quickly that cupric chloride could be used to convert palladium metal to palladium chloride. It's a very fast reaction, and this was the proposal to combine these two reactions. Combining reactions is not a straightforward solution in many cases. In this case, fortunately, it worked out. An inorganic reaction, oxidation of palladium with cupric chloride, worked in conjunction with the oxidation of ethylene to acetaldehyde. If you recognize, the ethylene to acetaldehyde is actually conversion of ethylene to vinyl alcohol. So this is the enol form. So this is the way in which they figured it out. And so if you add up, if you write this reaction, I'll just take a minute to tell you that this is in fact the most environmental friendly oxidation process that you can think of, probably one of the best that you can think of, because it, if you add all the reactions, it was recognized immediately that cupric chloride need not be in stoichiometric amounts. It could be added in catalytic amounts with bubbling of oxygen through it. And so you have basically inorganic reaction cycle, which is this is inorganic, and there is an organic reaction, organometallic organic reaction that is coupled with it. You can combine these two and you get acetaldehyde. You add all these things up and you find that the net reaction is only an organic reaction, and this works with fantastic atom economy, uses oxygen from the air in water medium, so it's environmental friendly. Environment friendly. So this was a fantastic discovery. But not only this reaction can be modified in order to have a variety of reactions. I just a minute. I want to set it up. I want to set up something else here. It's okay. Okay. Let me proceed. It's spending too much time. Yeah. Okay. So the importance of this reaction was such that acetaldehyde could be converted to acetic acid, and they could also make butyraldehyde modification with butene, I guess, and there were other simpler processes that could be used. If you use methanol, they could generate vinyl methyl ether, and with acetic acid vinyl acetate. So this this particular procedure was a fantastic discovery. The mechanism has been studied for all these years, and in 2009, when this paper was published, the final concluding statement said that this mechanism is still not clear. So today's lecture is going to be about an unfinished story, but you can read this story about two hydropallidations. It's obviously a take on Tale of Two Cities. It's written by somebody who has worked extensively on this Wacker reaction. Okay, so around the same time, 2009, Ira wrote this paper in Angewandte Chemie. And that, I said, makes good reading. So these two papers are very interesting. Henry did a lot of work on the kinetics of the whole reaction. And before I come to the mechanism, I will just quickly tell you some of the modifications. This is a very complicated reaction because palladium in solution exists as PdCl42-. That's what is indicated here. As you increase acetate concentration, palladium chloride goes to palladium acetate, and then it goes to the dimer of palladium acetate, and then it goes to a trimer. And it turns out that the dimer of palladium acetate is the most active for this reaction. So this reaction is catalyzed by the dimer. Okay, so this, you have to adjust the concentration of the various species in order to get the maximum yield of vinyl acetate, and that happens to be some 2 millimolar concentration or something in this particular case. So they could make acetaldehyde, vinyl ether, like I said, with just methanol. Vinyl methyl ether was produced. With acetic acid, they produce vinyl acetate. So this was an extremely fantastic discovery. like I said, Henry was one person who did the kinetics of this process extensively, and what he showed was that the rate of ethylene disappearance or acetaldehyde formation had this particular rate law, which means that the rate was proportional to the palladium concentration, directly proportional to the palladium concentration, directly proportional to ethylene concentration. No surprise, but it had inverse dependence on the chloride ion concentration, and it was second order in Cl minus. So that means it had an inverse dependence, inverse second order dependence on chloride concentration, and inverse dependence on H plus concentration also. So this was a problem. The best way to explain this chloride concentration dependence, that turned out to be simple. If you have to coordinate ethylene to PDCl4 minus, you have to dissociate one chloride, right? And the second step presumably involves a vacant site in which the incoming water molecule, the incoming reactant. Right now I have not told you it's water or oxygen, but let's assume that it is water because that's there. H plus is there involved in the rate equation. So maybe water is involved. So let's put water also in that, and that would be one more chloride dissociation. So this is consistent. These two steps are consistent with the kinetics. So the initial set of experiments or initial set of postulates were basically dependent on kinetics. So here is the step involved. PDCl4 converts to PDCl2 because of the two Cl minus have to leave, and you end up with an olefin coordinated to the. So the starting point for this step, let me see, this is A. Starting point is A, where we left off from the previous slide. That's the reaction. There are two possibilities now. Is the internal water molecule that is coordinated to palladium, is that attacking the ethylene, or is it an external attack of water? Now, the inverse dependence of H plus suggested that there was, and comparison of the rate of the reaction suggested that it was not OH minus that was attacking the olefin from outside. So what they suggested was that initially it is water that is involved, and subsequently there is a deprotonation step. Okay, so first you have a water attack, and then you have a deprotonation step. Okay, so if you have to postulate that this is the water attack, so you should have a plus charge here because it's OH2 attached to that species. So this is now you have a negative charge here. So this is kind of a zwitterionic species, and if you lose H plus from this molecule, you would end up with minus H plus would give you a species like this. Now you can also arrive at this species by attacking it with losing the proton from here and making an internal attack, and that would give you the same species B. B is the same species B. So as far as kinetics is concerned, or kinetics, whichever way you want to pronounce it, you have the formation of the species B. Formation of the species B as the initial step from which the reaction has to happen. This species in a rapid transformation gets converted to acetaldehyde, PD0 and 2Cl minus. Now we're going to take a look at each one of these separately. But first I want to tell you that there is sufficient information from other experiments, which we will discuss now, that the attack of the water molecule is probably working out trans to the palladium. Okay, trans to the palladium. That so consistent with what we have, the kinetic data, we said that the reaction probably proceeds in this fashion, and we could write it in both syn attack. This is syn attack and anti-attack. Okay, and in both cases we end up with this intermediate, which we labeled as B in the previous case. So let me now make it into a catalytic cycle. I ended up with the CH2CH2OH species. I can simply write it in such a way that the beta hydrogen, that is the hydrogen which is here, beta hydrogen, is now close to the palladium. I can have a reverse migratory insertion step, and I form a palladium hydride species with vinyl alcohol. This is reverse migratory insertion, okay, or beta hydrogen elimination. So both of these are okay as explanations. So now I have a vinyl alcohol coordinated to the palladium with a hydride species. So vinyl alcohol is just acetaldehyde. So I have just dissociated that. And if I do a reductive elimination of HCl from this, I will end up with a palladium 0 species. So as far as the catalytic cycle goes, if you remember, if you avoid copper and if you don't have oxygen in the reaction medium, the metal is precipitated out. Okay, so the metal is the final product. It is not a full catalytic cycle as far as the organic species are concerned. So acetaldehyde to vinyl alcohol to acetaldehyde is only keto-enol tautomerism. So this seems to be a perfectly valid mechanistic cycle. So what I have written now is a complete cycle in which the palladium 0 is converted to palladium chloride using cupric chloride. Cupric chloride converts cupric chloride converts the palladium 0 to PdCl2, and itself gets converted to cuprous chloride, and the cuprous chloride is oxidized with dioxygen in the air. So that is the inorganic cycle which completes the reaction cycle, and so you can keep going through this Wacker oxidation. But as I have indicated in this slide, although this is written using all the reactions that we have studied, migratory insertion, substitution reaction, beta hydride elimination, whatever else we know in chemistry like keto-enol tautomerism, this is not the right mechanism in all probability. Now, this is that's why I don't want you to just look at this slide and say, okay, you told us this mechanism is right. So now there are, I'll tell you the problems that are involved in this. Several people did isotopic labeling mechanisms, isotopic labeling studies. Isotopic labeling studies threw light on the mechanism, which suggested that the enol form or the alcohol is not a long-lived species, or it's not a significant species in the reaction cycle. So one can explain these things with very fast reaction steps after this beta hydride elimination. So one way to explain this is that this reaction cycle, which I will make it in green color to emphasize the fact that this is going super fast. So let's go through this cycle in a super fast pathway. So super fast. but it will have to be really super fast because any OH exchange with water, it is also very, very fast. So how fast can you do it? Can you do it better than a proton transfer? In all likelihood, that answer is a no. Proton transfers are supposed to be the fastest. If I go through this reaction cycle now with CD2, I will end up with a monodeutrated acetaldehyde. Expected product is monodeutrated acetaldehyde. But what you get is CD3CDO, which means that no deuterium is lost if I start out with CD2, I end up with CD3CDO, which has no loss of deuterium. One way in which you can say that, okay, maybe you didn't observe enough of the monodeutrated acetaldehyde, it's because deuterium exchanges are slow. So if you did the reaction with proton, the transfers would be fast. With deuterium, the reaction rates, the deuterium exchange is slow. So so the only way to counter this argument is to do the whole reaction with CH2CH2, that is normal ethylene, and completely change the water to D2O. So you do a reverse labeling. Okay, so everything other than the ethylene has got deuterium in it. Now you should have reverse labeling in the product. What you expect is CDH2CHO, that is monodeutrated acetaldehyde, but you get only acetaldehyde. You get only acetaldehyde is formed. No deuterium, no D. So this rules out the enol or the alcohol. Enol and alcohol are probably not involved in this reaction. This makes it very difficult to write a reaction mechanism in which you can either write an enol or an alcohol. So that's why you have a lot of difficulty. But I will tell you some more information about nicely labeled substrates which tell you how the attack could have taken place from outside, that is external exo attack. We are not solving this problem. This problem is associated with the fact that the kinetics are very clear, that you have an inverse proton dependence, and people are still not able to reconcile all the experiments that they have done. Now let me go to the next slide. This is the explanation. Okay, sorry, I think, yeah. The explanation, please ignore this structure. This structure is the one please ignore the structure for a minute. So let us assume that the enol is not formed significantly, and the moment you have formation of this CH2CH2OH species, you have migration of the hydride to the palladium. So that is hydride to the palladium, and hydride migrates back to this CH2. That will give you CH3CHOH, and all these are internal reactions, and so you do not have to interact the species with external water molecule. So that is the only explanation. This is one explanation. So this is what is going on. What you're having is, this is happening in a cage situation. This negatively charged species undergoes a hydride migration, and the hydride migration, this hydride migrates to the palladium. From the palladium, it goes back to the CH2, and so you end up with this 7 and 7, oops, and 7, this species is the one which gives you the product, and it has lost only this hydrogen which is coming from the water molecule. So because this is just coming from the water molecule and it's not migrating to the it's not doing a ketoenol tautomerism, the hydride that you transferred from the CH2OH, the CH2CHOH, this is completely internal. You are transferring hydrogen from the CH2CH2 back to the next hydrogen, next carbon. So you're basically using the palladium as a shuttle. It is transferring the hydrogen from one carbon to the other carbon. There are a few reactions in which a 1,2 shift happens in the presence of a metal. Again, this is vitamin B12 with cobalt. Again, that's another thing that we are skipping. But if you have Elias and Gupta's book, then Gupta was one person who studied vitamin B12 extensively. So I'm sure that is dealt with in that book, but I do not have time to cover that also. So 1,2 hydride shift is what is postulated as an explanation inside a cage from starting with this species which is labeled as 5. One other possibility is postulated by Coleman. This is Coleman and Hegedus. Coleman and Hegedus have written another book which is also very good. And Coleman proposes a hydride shift not going back and forth between the palladium and the carbons. He suggests that the hydrogen is directly transferred from one carbon to the other carbon. So this is the hydride migration to carbon step. Why do it in 2 steps? You migrate the hydride from one of the carbons to the other carbon. Like I said, this type of a hydride migration is not something that we encounter in organometallic chemistry very easily or in many places. The only 1,2 shift that I know of is the cobalt promoted vitamin B12 1,2 shift, but that also involves a metal. So these are the 2 ways by which people have explained the fact that you have no loss of deuterium when you do CD2CD reactions with CD2CD2. That this is something like this might be happening. Okay, now I want to address the question: where is the attack coming from? Attack on a coordinated alkene is most probably coming from an external attack, and that is because of 2 or 3 experiments that have been done, and these experiments are consistent if you assume what we have learnt about carbon monoxide insertion and some other reactions that we know about in organic chemistry. Okay, let me explain it slowly. Here you have, let's assume that the attack is taking place from outside, then you will see how the stereochemistry works out. Ackermann was the person who did this experiment. He took trans 1,2-dideuteroethylene. Instead of the per-deuteroethylene that we used in the previous experiment, you have now used trans 1,2-deuterated ethylene. This means that we are only looking for the geometry of these 2 hydrogens and these 2 deuteriums. How are they going to be related in the product? So what is known in the literature is that, just like I told you, that I can use acetate in order to excess of acetic acid or sodium acetate in order to generate vinyl acetate. If I use excess of chloride, I can also improve the proportion of a chloride substituted compound being formed. Okay, and if you use excess of chloride and cupric chloride, then the reaction generates addition of OH and Cl. So this is the reaction that they utilized. The assumption is this is the same condition or the same similar condition under which the Wacker reaction proceeds. So let's attack the ethylene with OH minus or H2O and then loss of proton. Either way, you will end up with a species which I have, I'm going to indicate with a blue color. This is the species that I'm talking about. What you have is palladium and OH trans to each other. Palladium and OH trans to each other. Okay. Now it is known that if I do an oxidative cleavage with CuCl2, this is again paper based work based on Ackermann's work, that if you use excess of chloride and excess of CuCl2, the Cl minus attack or the oxidation of the palladium species by the CuCl2 can occur in such a way that the Cl minus attack also happens from the outside. So in other words, PdCl2, PD0 is not generated, PdCl2 is kicked out, and you have a Cl minus or a Cl attacking the carbon with. So this is an sp3 center, the one that I am marking in blue. So this sp3 center undergoes inversion. Okay, so the product that you get, the organic product that you get, has ended up with the chloride and the OH on the same side. OH and the chloride on the same side. That is the only thing that we are saying in this. Once you have a chloride and a Cl and OH on the same side, in order to form the epoxide by addition of a base, if you just add base to this, you would end up with a internal attack of this OH, which will become O minus, and chloride would leave, Cl minus would leave, and then you would get the epoxide. And this now turns out to be, this is well known, the SN2 type of a displacement would have to rotate the orientation so that the Cl and the OH are on opposite sides. So this is the geometry from which the elimination can take place. So the fact that you get the cis epoxide is got from trans dideuteroethylene suggests that the OH and the Cl are coming from the same side. Now Ackermann had proof that the oxidation with the chlorine is happening from the side opposite the palladium. So this suggested that the OH is coming from the opposite side. Now I'm going to give you a series of experiments which will tell you that everything is consistent if you assume that OH is coming from the opposite side. I'll tell you one more experiment. This experiment involves carbon monoxide. If you have carbon monoxide in the reaction medium, there is a CO insertion in the sigma palladium carbon sigma bonded species. So this can also be used to advantage to generate to understand the stereochemistry. This was done by somebody else, not by Ackermann, but for the sake of understanding, I have written in the books and papers. You might find a different species, but it doesn't matter. I have written out the reaction with the trans dideuteroethylene. Suppose you do it with this, and you have OH attacking from the opposite side of the palladium. So this hydroxypalladation coloidation, okay, is happening in the trans geometry, trans fashion. So you have OH minus attacking on this carbon and the double bond becoming a single bond between palladium and carbon. I have written it exaggerated fashion so that you can see the geometry of the two species. Now, carbon monoxide, if it is there, undergoes a palladium assisted migratory insertion of carbon monoxide, and we know that this in other cases it's happening internally, and so you have retention during migratory insertion. Migratory insertion of carbon monoxide occurs with retention. This we know from the experiment that was done by Whitesides. So if I have this species now I can make the lactone, right, the beta lactone, by a simple rotation again and an internal attack. I can generate the lactone. The lactone again has got the two deuteriums on the same side. So this can be explained only if I have external attack, because the CO insertion happens with retention of configuration. CO insertion happens with retention, and so in order to explain the formation of the cis product, in this case also the external attack is necessary. Okay, so this is consistent with the external attack. So one last point I will just add about the mechanism that is there in Elschenbroich and Salzer's book. That's the one that I have. They have combined these two in order to explain all the steps. They have combined what we have suggested, that it goes through the palladium. So they have written out the palladium assisted hydride 1,2 hydride migration. Okay, that's the basis for Elschenbroich and Salzer's reaction cycle. So what we have seen in this whole reaction mechanism is that it requires two hydride shifts if you insist on palladium being involved, or a carbon hydride from one carbon to the other carbon, which is not commonly observed in organic chemistry. So from that point of view, I prefer the palladium assisted shift and not Coleman and Hegedes's transfer. But all the other mechanistic proposals are consistent with the kinetics and the labeling studies. One labeling study was done with C2D4, and that showed no loss in deuterium. The other labeling study was done with CHD, and this was with trans. Actually, in Coleman Hegedes, they have described a reaction with cis also, but then the key information that they have obtained is the same. You have to show retention in the carbon monoxide insertion step, and you have anti-attack or trans-chloropalladation or trans-hydroxypalladation to understand this whole reaction mechanism. So the question of an internal attack or an external attack of a nucleophile, this you'll realize that this is a reaction which is just a nucleophilic attack on a olefin, and that can happen in both external and internal forms, and there is enough evidence in the literature for both types of attack, and that is the reason why it is so difficult to decide one way or the other. But whatever you do, you have to keep it consistent with what is observed in these experiments. Okay, so I'm going to stop at this stage, and I will show you briefly CH activation. CH activation, and I have to unshare and share. So let me slide show. Okay, slideshow. Okay, I think it would have worked. Okay, fine. This is the reaction that we are talking about. Let me. CH bond is difficult because of the thermodynamics of the reaction. For example, CH bond energy in methane is 105. If you go to an sp2 hydrogen, it is even more, 110 kilocalories per mole. So breaking it is difficult, and there are two reasons for this, and this is both kinetic and thermodynamic, not just the thermodynamic reason that I told you. Kinetic reason is also there. If you notice the CH, the Dewar-Chatt-Duncanson model, Dewar-Chatt-Duncanson model, DCD model, is the one that is used for CH interaction with metals. We have already seen agostic interactions, etc. And heterolytic splitting is not going to be possible because H leaving as H minus also requires a lot of energy. Usually you need a metal in order to assist the same thing. So if I want to pump in electron density into this sigma star orbital, first of all, the sigma star orbital is very high in energy because the CH is highly stabilized. CH sigma star is also high in energy. Now, in addition to that, the accessibility of the sigma star orbital is also very poor. There are three groups which are blocking the approach of the metal onto the CH sigma star. Okay, so that is why simple breaking of the CH bond is not going to be easy. Now there are three different ways by which CH activation has been realized, and I'm tempted to give you tempted to show you. Oops. Now I have yeah. So here is just the outline of this talk. Basically is based on talk I had given earlier. So there are four different ways, not three. One is electrophilic activation of the CH bond. So you come in with a metal M plus, and you go out with MC and H plus. So you end up with something like this as electrophilic substitution. You also have oxidative addition, and I'm going to give you one or two examples of that. And sigma bond metathesis. Sigma bond metathesis is when I have a sigma bond which is undergoing change in the position, and then 1,2 addition. I'm going to skip this part. Most of the interactions are preceded by agostic interactions, which we have already studied. So let me tell you, electrophilic activation is done by, studied by Russians extensively, and also by a person, Ayushmann Sen. I have forgotten the spelling of Ayushmann Sen. Ayushmann Sen is actually Professor Diptiman's brother. So there's a connection to the institute. Ayushmann has come and given talks here. He has also moved into materials chemistry. He no longer works on organometallic chemistry. So Ayushmann Sen is one person who has worked on electrophilic activation. So this is one type of activation where you have high oxidation state. Okay, platinum, in this case it is +2, but it is here, it is +4. So there you have high oxidation state chemistry. So yeah, there is also another person called Roy Perianna. But this is a West Indian actually, not an Indian. This is he has also studied this type of reaction, and I will tell you now the first example of an oxidative addition was for an internal ligand. Ligand got oxidized, but the equivalent example is here. Photolysis of this dihydride led to loss of these two hydrogens, and you have W with Cp2. And this is now extremely electron deficient, and so it eats up the solvent by CH activation. So this was done by Green in 1970. And there are other examples where you have such type of reactions. Whitesides has also done something in CH activation. So let me proceed. The most common type of oxidative addition is in group 8 metals, that a D8 configuration, when you have a low oxidation state, and the low oxidation state can be generated in a variety of ways. Here it's generated through photochemical activation, again loss of H2, and then the solvent is interacted with the metal and oxidative addition takes place. So many of these cases, the oxidation state of the metal is very low, and the metal is really desperate in order to get electrons. And the weak interaction of the CH or the CD bond with the metal leads to oxidative addition. So electrophilic activation and oxidative addition with low valent metals is one thing, and there are very few examples where you have 3D metals doing this type of oxidation. The first one was done by Field, LD Field, an Australian chemist, who again activated it using removal of dihydrogen, and the solvent got activated. You'll notice that in many of these cases the solvent gets eaten up, and if the solvent was not doing it, it would eat up the ligand. So that is why CH activation is very difficult to study. You will have to study it with a species which doesn't have active hydrogens. For that reason, many cases pentamethyl cyclopentadienyl is used and not CP, because CP hydrogens are easily activated. Okay. So sigma bond metathesis is, here's one example where I have given sigma bond metathesis. Presumably, the hydrogen which is present on the CH4 is CH3H, and so you've ended up with a new bond between this CH3, which is labeled, and this CH3, which is unlabeled, goes off with hydrogen, and that's how you get CH4. So sigma bond, this is presumably going through sigma bond metathesis because lutetium cannot undergo further oxidation. So there are systems where you have lanthanides and actinides, and then you can have sigma bond metathesis as the only option because oxidative addition is not feasible. So sigma bond metathesis is has also been proposed in other cases. It's not only with lanthanides and actinides. When metals are in a slightly higher oxidation state, in this case it is ruthenium-2, it has been proposed that you have sigma bond activation like so. In our group, we had studied some sigma bond metathesis in the context of CH interaction with metals, and just for the previous reaction involves exchange of hydrogen between a methyl group and a benzene ring. So and in this process methane is eliminated and the phenyl group is left behind as a ruthenium coordinated product. So this particular reaction happens by activation of this eta-2 coordinated benzene hydrogen, and it's now transferred to the methyl. And it is this transition state that you are seeing in this picture right here. So the hydrogen from the benzene ring is going over to the methyl group, and it is a simple vibrational mode that connects the two species together. Okay, so sigma bond metathesis, electrophilic activation, oxidative addition. Those are the three major ways by which reactions work. That is, CH activation works. In our department, Professor Jagirdar is one person who is interested in CH activation. And I will stop here because of lack of time. I just want to tell you that I hope you have all signed up for a slot in for the Viva. You have any questions, you can ask now. I would like you to submit your assignments as quickly as possible. I think initially I had mentioned today as the last date, but definitely before the day before you submit your Viva. So that's the, don't give it to me just 2 minutes before the Viva, because I need to go through your paper. I need to have an idea of what you have written before I have it. Okay, thank you. Any questions? No questions? Then we'll stop here.
Sir, regarding the Viva, is it based both on the writing assignment and also the course, or is just one of them?
Sorry?
The Viva, is it based on both the writing assignment and the course?
Yes, obviously. I'm not going to ask you anything which we have not covered in the course. Suppose you have, I want to know how you have applied what you have learned in the course to the paper. Okay.
All right, sir. So the topics I have in my written assignment, they are not taught in the course, like bordered hydrogen chemistry and ligand-assisted catalysis.
Yeah, I didn't cover it. Yes. Okay. Yes, but the principles that are covered in those, except for aromatization, dearomatization steps, etc., most of the steps are covered. So it's not very borrowing hydrogen strategy and ligand assistance is only. It is not completely out of the syllabus or out of the topics that we have covered. So no problem. You should have understood the paper basically.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Anybody else has any question?
Hello, sir. Our final exam will be 50 marks like the previous exams.
I'm going to take all 4 exams, all the assignments your writing assignment, your viva, and quizzes, that whatever we have given, etc. So it is a combination of everything. The test itself will be a minimum of 1.5 hours. So be prepared to sit for 1.5 hours continuously, and the same rules apply. I am giving you 1.5 hours, but I have not set the paper, obviously. So I will tell you, be prepared to sit for 1.5 hours at least. Okay.
So, sir, the syllabus is the whole course or after the last midterm?
Yeah, you see, the way in which I have taught this course, I have started with the simplest species and I have tried to cover the most complicated reaction that is there in the literature. So, just about everything is, all the principles that are taught in the initial few classes are there till the end. So I can't really separate out, that portion is not there. And 6 months portion, 6 months, 4 months portion, not even 4 months. October we started, 3.5 months portion. Should be easy for you. It's more difficult for me to set a paper. It's easier for me to set a paper saying that only the catalytic processes will be questioned. But that doesn't help me or help you. You need to know all the steps involved. Like today we talked about migratory insertion, cis retention of configuration. All these things are based on what we discussed in the first few classes. Okay. Okay. Any other question?
Sir, regarding the last assignment you have given, like playing the game.
Yes.
So is it necessary to submit the assignment? Because I don't know how to play Rummy, like whatever it is. I tried it, but
you don't need to know how to play Rummy. I have explained it in the short paper that I have attached. So it's just a matter of having sequences. So it is a question of sequence. So for example, if I say in this that species 6 follows species 6, so 5, I need to have this species, loss of chloride and formation of this species. So this describes the sequence. So I have put this as one card, this is another card, this is a third card. So similarly, everything is described in terms of cards which you have to arrange in a particular sequence. I use that game purely because that has the option of being computerized and you can play it any number of times with a computer. There are earlier when we had physical classes, we had played it in a class. 4 people have played it with the same set of cards. I have physical cards which I have played with the students. Okay. So here are a bunch of physical cards. I don't know whether I'm still on video. Yeah, I suppose I'm still on video. Yeah, so you can see the cards here. So these are physical cards and I have dealt it out with 4 students and they have played it in order to form a sequence.
So we just need to match one of the sequences, right? Like there were colors given.
Yeah, each reaction is in a different color. What you have on the computer screen is basically color coded, and it has some special cards which you can put in any place. So this is like what they call as a joker in a card game. So the Heck reaction is described in black, and each reaction color coded. It's color coded. I think the Suzuki is in red, and Sonogashira is in blue and Negishi is in green. So, you just need to arrange it in the right order. So these are the cards. So if you have a Negishi coupling, you just arrange it in the right sequence. Okay, and if it doesn't say, if you think that you have got it and it doesn't say game completed, you can send the snapshot to me and I can check it out, because we have put in all the sequences. For example, A plus B gives C. You can also write it as B plus A giving C. We have tried to make sure that the computer will recognize both sequences, but there are like when you have 4, the sequence, the numbers are more, probabilities are more. So you can always send a snapshot and I will explain it to you why it didn't do it or whatever. Okay, so Arpita will send link. Yeah.
Hello, sir. In the Suzuki reaction, there is only 10 cards, right? But it's required 11. So
no, in all the cases, any 10 cards should complete a sequence. You don't have to write the same. You don't have to get all the cards together in one. You can have 3, 3, 4, or 4, 3, 3, like that. You can arrange it in any sequence. It doesn't have to be the same reaction right through. You can have 3. The first set can be from Suzuki, the second set can be from Heck, the third set can be from Negishi or Sonogishi.
Okay,
yeah. So it doesn't have to be the same color right through. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. She will send you a link based on your choice of timings. We will then meet. Okay, see you. You can all leave. I need to close up my PowerPoints.